Hello everybody. Today, exactly 1500 years ago, St. Columba was born. Of course dates are a bit different then, but this is the traditional day of his birth. St. Columba, who came from Ireland, who got involved as a young man in various conflicts between different kingdoms, got involved in a particularly bloody battle where he was responsible for the deaths of a number of people, about which he felt guilty for having for his part in it, as penance for that, and having become someone committed to Christ, he decided to leave Ireland, to leave behind this painful past and go to new countries where he could proclaim the good news of Jesus. And so he set off with a few followers, and initially they landed on the west coast of Scotland at the Mull of Kintyre, but he could see Ireland from there on a really clear day, and so that wasn't far enough away for him to really turn his back on it. So he went further north and came to the Isle of Iona, and landed there at what is now St. Columba's Bay. And he couldn't see Ireland from the bay, so he climbed up what is now called the hill at the back of the island to make sure that he couldn't see Ireland. And as the story goes, because he couldn't, this was the island where he decided to settle. And of course, being on a sea route, it was very convenient for travelling round and for being a missionary in those days. And so the Iona community that many of us are so fond of started. Those of us who've been to Iona will have probably been on the traditional pilgrimage, and St. Columba's Bay is one of the places where we walk to. And the suggestion there is that we can pick up a pebble from the beach, and allow it to represent something that we want to turn our back on. And having decided what that is, we can hurl the pebble into the sea as a way symbolically of saying, I turn my back on that, just as St. Columba turned his back on his guilty past in Ireland. And I think it's important sometimes to turn our back on the past. The Christian word for it is repent, of course, changing direction, and it's important sometimes to learn from the past and allow it to influence the new direction that you might take. But I think often our past haunts us, and it's good to know that if we acknowledge our part in any failures that we've been involved in, then we can be forgiven, and we can set it behind us and not only be forgiven but forget it. It's not always easy to move on from things, sometimes big things like the kind of thing I've sort of been describing, but also sometimes quite small things that we get caught up in. Somebody doesn't behave fairly towards us, or we get diddled in a shop, and these things haunt us and go round and round in our minds. Here too, I think it's important to turn our back on them, to be really disciplined and say, I'm not going to think about that anymore because it's not doing me any good. And so in a number of ways, I think St. Columba's example of turning his back on a past that wasn't doing him any good is one that we might follow in the larger and in the smaller areas of our lives.